Alrighty, today we're going to be looking at a tutorial for a virtual camera in virtual reality, so a virtual camera. So this is a different way of doing things, especially if you're using entire CGI scenes rather than trying to track a real life camera. And this also works with, because it essentially acts like a virtual reality game, will work with any virtual reality headset, including inside-out tracking ones like the Rift S, Windows Mixed Reality, and HTC Cosmos. As well as the original Rift, the Oculus Quest, any of the other Vives, the Index, everything like that. So what we get is a camera like this that I can control in virtual reality, but I can still look around the virtual scene. And we have some other functionality on this. I've still got the changed lenses. I can take a photo of the viewfinder, what the viewfinder sees, rather than what I see. And I've added a better stabilization system that acts a lot more like the way a Steadicam would, rather than just that general stabilizer. And lastly, there is a teleportation system, so we can jump around. So this one is set up a lot more like for what's called virtual scouting, so finding a shot rather than taking a shot, if that makes sense. And then I will be doing a tutorial detailing some of the changes I did for a more virtual filming setup for this. But this is going to be split into a couple of tutorials. The first one is simply getting the camera in with the viewfinder. The next one is going to be about stealing the teleport system from one of the Unreal Examples virtual reality things. And then lastly, we'll be detailing. So most of the things I did in the other tutorials about functionality will apply to this, but there are a few caveats and some that are specific to this, and so we'll be looking in the last one about how to do that. Alrighty, so the first thing we're going to be doing, we're in Unreal 4.25, yep, that's right. So we're going to be creating a new project. So you're better off creating this in an empty project and getting it all working, and then simply moving the blueprint over to your existing project when you need to use it. So we're going to start with the blank one as always. Just leave these as default and give it a funky name. We are going to call this probably VR camera system. Why not? And create the project. Righty, so when you're on Unreal, the first thing we're going to be doing is enabling and disabling a couple of plugins. So the first one we're going to need to enable is the Composure plugin under Compositing. And then secondly, under Virtual Reality, you're going to want to disable the one for the virtual reality headset you're not using. So if you're using Oculus, then you want to sort of leave that one enabled and disable Steam VR, and the exact opposite if you're using HTC or the Valve Index. If you're using Windows Mixed Reality, enable the Mixed Reality one and disable the others. It will work, but this will save you from accidentally using a plugin that's not from your virtual reality system, and just make the editor start up a little quicker. What we can also enable under here, under virtual production, is the take recorder. Yes, pretty sure it's a take recorder. And this can come in later when we want to. Might as well just enable it now so we can use it later and restart the engine. Alrighty, so we're back at it. Let's just close that. Alrighty, so go over to our content browser. We're also going to want the Composure thing open here. If you don't have it open, it's under Window and then, oh gosh, somewhere in here. Composure right there. Open that one up and put it somewhere as well. So we're going to start with our basic scene. I'm just going to delete the player controller. So what we're going to start with is just getting in VR. So if you already know how to do that, then you can go ahead and skip. But what we're going to do, but otherwise, yeah. So we're going to create a new blueprint class, and we're going to make it a pawn. I'm just going to call it VR, actually. So we will be replacing this with a different one when we do the teleportation, but this is going to just be for testing and just basic use. So we're going to open it up. like so. And we need to add a camera, so not a cine camera, just a regular camera, like so. We then also need to add a motion controller, and we need to add 2 of those and name them one left, one right. So left controller and right controller. Alrighty. Rename. Make sure the controllers are parents of the root, not drop here to attach. Yeah, make sure they're parents of the root, not parents of each other, otherwise you get some funky things happening. Next, what we want to do is go into our motion controllers and set what hand they're tracking. So that's just down a bit, and then it gives you the motion controller source. So left is left, and right we want to set to right. And then lastly, just for ease of use, I'm going to hit display device model and just leave it on default. Like so, that way we can see them in VR. Next, what we're going to do is we want to go over to the begin play. And if you're using Oculus, you have to do this. I don't think you have to do this in HTC. But what we want to do is we want to set floor position. Was that not floor? Oh no, it's called set tracking origin, and we would just want to leave it on floor level, like so. So compile, save. I'm going to put headphones on, like so. So if we just drag it out into our scene, I'm going to spin it around. We see something more interesting. And then lastly, what we want to do is in the details section down here, we just want to auto-possess player 1. That means we will be this. And so when we preview in VR, I grab my headset, just like that, I am in. Let me get rid of that and that. Yay! Just like that, I am in VR. Oh, keep rubbing on the mic. And I got my controllers and they're tracking. So now that we're in VR, next what we have to do is we have to look at... Alright, so we got into VR. Next we have to look at our camera. And so what we want to do is we want to do what we looked at before. No, thank you. What we want to do is we want to look at what we did before, which was setting up a camera working with composure. So I did a video on that, but the basics is what we want to do is we're going to go to all classes down here and find the cinema actor and use that. Call it, I don't know, camera, VR camera, tracked camera. Think of something fun to call it, like so. So we want to drag that into our scene, and so what we're going to do is we're just going to copy the. We're going to take our VR headset. We're going to copy the location and apply it to this camera. Paste and spin this around 180, like so. And I'm simply going to drop the track camera as the VR camera, so then when we move the VR camera, we move the track camera. Like so. Next, what we want to do is go into here and we want to get this tracked camera and use it in this blueprint. Sounds tricky, but it's not too tricky. So what we want to do is we want to add a new variable. This variable I'm just going to call tracked camera. And under our variable type, if we type cine, we get cine camera actor, and we want the object reference, like that. Now, compile, save. Next, what we want to do is this button here. We want to make the variable public. This is like a really creepy, realistic looking eye for some reason. Like so. Now, if we minimize that and look at our VR headset, scroll down, we'll see here is our track camera. So this is that variable, which we can then select that. So now, in our blueprint, we can reference it as though it was as part of this blueprint, which is sort of the basis of this, how this works. So what we're going to do is we're going to do sort of like what we did with Steam VR and the basic camera tracker. So we want to get our relative transform. of the right controller or left controller. Preference is up to you. So we're using this instead of SteamVR's get position and rotation, like that. Then we want to use a set relative transform. Just select any of them and delete that reference and replace it with the tracked camera, like that. And so this is all you have to do. So we're going to do the root component of the tracked camera, like so. We're going to do it every game tick, so, and the new transform is going to be that. Okay, the last thing you want to do is go to our tracked camera here. We're going to unlock it from the HMD so it doesn't move with our headset, and we're going to untick camera mesh hidden in game. Now if we save and play, oh, hit it again. Voila! We have the world's largest Fisher and Paykel camera. It's a very fake looking cinema camera. Now we have a few problems with this camera, but we're getting there already. So the first problem, I guess you could say, is its size. Now you would think to just scale it down, and that is a good thought, but the problem is this actually overrides the scale. So what we want to do instead is, what I've done, I'm going to sneeze. What we can use is a set relative location and rotation instead. Get that, plug that into there, and delete that, and then plug that into there, like so. Now if we drag off of that and use the break transform and simply get the location and rotation of it, like that, now this is no longer going to override the scale of the object. So we can just come into here and change the scale to, I think, about half works, I find. 0.5, 0.5. Save. And now if we try it, we should get a much, wrong controller, a much smaller camera, much more manageable camera. Now our next thing is, this is a very unnatural way of holding a camera just by the very, very end of it. And so we want to fix that next. And so the way we fix that is by going into our track camera blueprint. And all we want to do is simply move this camera forward. So I move it about there. I think it's 50. Yep. And compile and save it. Now when we play, just like that, our hand is about where the sensor would be. And so we can do camera movements. Amazing. So the last thing we need to set up, although technically this will work because this is a cinema camera, the problem or issue, I guess, is that we can't actually see what we're doing. So unless you want to go GoPro style, the other thing I'm going to do is change. This is not necessary. This is just going to make it easier for you to see what I'm doing in virtual reality by 1080. Alrighty. So the other thing we want to do is have a viewfinder, and that's when composure comes in. So there is this thing. If I go in here, it's called a 2D, a scene capture 2D component. And that looks like a camera, and then it captures a scene, that sort of what it sees. The problem is it doesn't have any of the settings a cinema camera actor has, so that's why we have to use composure. Now, for composure, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new composure, or a new composition, and you'll have to do this on all the levels you use this in, sadly. And we want to empty composure, and we're just going to call it tracked camera viewfinder. That looks good. Alrighty, and that just now created an object in our scene, and place a camera over here. Now what we want to right click that again and click add a layer element, and we're going to use a CG layer, so a compositing element for capturing a portion of the CG scene. We're actually going to capture the entirety of the CG scene, but we're going to use that. That has now put a CG element into our scene. And so I'm just going to drag that and put it as part of the VR as well. So we move that around. Now, if we go to the details panel of this one, we have some settings down here. So on input, what you want to do is under camera source, you want to change it from inherited to override and select our tracked camera. And now it's switched to that. Now on the output, what we're going to use is what's called a render target. And so this is essentially a way of turning this into a material in Unreal that can then be applied to other things. So that is under media. Is it? No. It is under materials and textures. Here it is, render target. I'm going to call this again camera view finder. Like that. Now, if you open it up, we have a couple of settings. The basics is we want the size. I'm going to change it to, oh, not that, 1920 by 1080. Do not go extreme with this, as it will cause a lot of lag and engine issues, I guess. So this also determines the resolution of the screenshot when you take one, which we'll do later down the track. Lastly, we want to change it from 16-bit float to sRGB 8-bit. This is your standard image, and again, this isn't actually going to affect when we render it out from, say, the sequence editor or anything. This will simply affect the screenshots when we do it, or the screenshots, the photos, whatever you want to call it, and save that. Next, what we want to do, so if we look at our outputs, if we add an output, what we can do is we can go render target asset, we go down again, and we can drag that into here. And as you can see, it updates for what the camera sees. Sorry. So what we want to do next is we want to right click it and we're going to go create material, and that'll create a material out of that we can then apply to objects. So what we're going to do in here is we actually want to change the type of material it is. So at the moment it's just your standard material. You get some, you can see the sun reflecting on it and stuff. That actually makes it pretty hard to look at. That's why sun hoods and things exist for real cameras. We can simply go about that a different method, seeing as this is in fact not real life. So we simply want to change the shading model of it to unlit, like that, and drag the RGB into the emissive color. This will make it, as you can see, there's no reflection or anything on it anymore. Apply that, save that, like so. Lastly, we're going to go back into our track camera, open the full blueprint editor. Under the viewport, we want to add a plane, like so. Now you want to rotate that like that, and then spin it around like that. Now you want to take whatever aspect ratio you're using and type, oh my gosh, sorry. Type that into the scale. So we want 16 by 9. Like that. Now that is huge, but if we hit the lock button, that will lock its aspect, and then we can scale that down and it'll retain that aspect ratio. And so you can position this however you like. You can position more than one of this as well. It's really up to you. I'm a fan of sort of a smaller on the top, but no judging. Let's change the snap size. Like that. So about where that was. You can put it on the side. It really personal preference. You can have more than one of these again. Under the material, we just simply want to change it to our viewfinder material. And voila. Compile and save it. For some reason, when you compile, the camera goes missing from the CG element. You just have to reselect it. I'm not 100% sure on that, but if we save it and have a look, put the headset on, just like that, we have a camera, ladies and gentlemen, with a viewfinder. We had a camera ready, but now we've got the viewfinder, and my batteries are still low, which goes through the viewfinder anyway. So yeah, that is the very basics of how this works. So most of the tutorials I did, such as the virtual camera usability, pretty much everything in that. On top of that, the better lens changing method, the zoom lens, the autofocus, all of that can be applied to this camera as well. I guess the only things to get around some of the problems in that, so you have to do them all in the tracked camera blueprint. And then lastly, you might notice there's no cinema camera component. So if you wanted to use something like the set focus settings, let's untick that. Set focus settings. So that requires a cinema camera component, which this is not. And so all you want to do is get component, get cinema component, drag off of this camera, yeah, get cinema camera component like that, and then simply also get a self and go like that. And then that's how you can hook stuff that require the cinema component up, because there is a cinema component in here somewhere. It just doesn't, for whatever reason, give you access to it. And so that's how you can use things like the set focus and what have you. So I will be releasing another video detailing that, as well as detailing the teleportation. The last thing is, if you want to use the sequence or the take recorder, to do that, what we did was we did a when we did that, we did, take the open sequence recorder, but you may notice when we play in VR that it actually closes. And so to keep that open, you just have to go to your advanced settings for the play, and somewhere in here, here it is, should minimize editor on VRPIE. Just untick that, like so, and then now when you play, the editor will stay open and it can use that particular script. But other than that, that is the basics of how to do this. So this will obviously work with your inside-out tracking devices, Cosmos, Rift S, mixed reality, everything like that. And this is, in my personal opinion, actually a nicer way of doing that sort of virtual camera stuff, because you can obviously see the entire scene. But this will not work with if you're trying to use a real camera. Awesome.